The post-millennial New York Times blames pro-Israel money for Jamaal Bowman's loss, then abruptly changes headline. We also have AOC taking aim at AIPAC after Bowman's loss. This is big news. The group, which has historically funded more Republicans than Democrats and rarely spent on Democratic primaries, spent at least $14.5 million against Bowman. Quote, "This is about $20 million in big money being spent in a historic sum unlike any seen in American history, point blank, period," AOC told reporters from the Capitol on Wednesday. "I think we need to have a real conversation about AIPAC. I think that we do need to have a real conversation about a Republican, primarily Republican and largely Republican financed organization playing and dumping money and playing an extremely divisive role in the Democratic Party." So right now, there are a lot of people on the right who are defending Bowman having lost because AIPAC spent I believe it's a record amount of money in a congressional race.
And I think they probably didn't need to. The story with Bowman is that he was redistricted. And Bowman is the sort of guy who's going to do great in the Bronx, but he's not going to do so great in Scarsdale. And so, you know, AIPAC is important, but there's clearly more to the story here. I think that, you know, it's not quite as simple as it's just AIPAC. But in general, AIPAC, it is true that AIPAC is a powerful lobby group. They're one of them. I think they're probably up there with, you know, most powerful. They're powerful. I don't think anyone denies that.
Yeah, this story has always been really interesting to me because the redistricting aspect, but also, you know, a lot of the media is talking about it like the more progressive candidate, Bowman, lost to a more moderate Democrat. And people might not think that label totally fits, but it does seem like it's reflective of a conversation that's being held within the Democratic Party about the influences that are impacting their races, as opposed to a typical race that we think of where it's Republican versus Democrat. Because this is a primary, it's more of a chance for Democrats to evaluate, you know, where the money is coming from and what values they are looking to elect to Congress.
Yeah, and Latimer hardly seems like, you know, the sort of, if I were a young person, he's not exactly somebody I would be enthusiastic about voting for. I mean, he looks like one of those fancy Japanese goldfish with the googly eyes.
I'm trying to look up the spending from AIPAC on Open Secrets, and it doesn't come up.
I mean, I don't get the sense that. So I wasn't aware of the redistricting with Bowman, but I kind of get the sense that a lot of his problem was that he didn't go door to door in Westchester. Like he wasn't going up to try and
And
like,
his district
also
always had part of Westchester, from what I understand.
Yeah, there's a really toxic thing about some of these sort of celebrity Democrats is that the star power is going to carry them through, and I think that's, you know,
I mean,
maybe a little hubris there.
He specifically said that he was giving thanks to Dearborn, which is clearly because of the progressives in Dearborn, the attitude in Dearborn about the situation in Gaza and Israel. And I think that the Jewish population of Westchester just wasn't having it. And then you throw that on top of it, where he is, you know, he's got the brain of a shoe, because everyone knew that the pulling of the fire alarm was, you know, he did it. There was no covering that up. So I think that I got the sense that it was a combination of he embarrassed the Democrats and he had the issue with the population of Westchester. I don't know that the redistricting had as big a significance as anyone else. So if you want to go ahead and enlighten me, I'd be welcome to hear it.
His district now contains it's a lot more kind of northerly focused. That's basically it, and the new map dropped like not all that long ago.
Yeah, I mean, the thought is that he lost a section of the Bronx that he had before, which means that he lost a certain amount of support there. That, especially if you're saying you know he irritated people, if there's a large Jewish community in Westchester and they are now irritated with him because of his comments or anything else, it makes him more vulnerable than just a traditional primary matchup because of the geopolitical influence on American politics this year. Yeah, I don't know.
So I guess nobody cares about AIPAC. So.
I mean, from my perspective, I know AIPAC gets a lot of attention, but if you look at the race, you know, just a handful of races. So the Jamaal Bowman one, yes, Jamaal Bowman lost and AIPAC spent money. But you look at the Kentucky race with Thomas Massey, They weren't able to unseat Thomas Massey, and people will say,
AIPAC spent money against Massey?
AIPAC spent a lot of money.
Yeah,
against
one
Massey.
point that I would
said,
make.
hold on, let me finish. He said, it's like they went after him. Now, granted, some people will say he's an incumbent, and so that's why. And there's validity to that. But still, if AIPAC was as powerful, the money that AIPAC spent, they should be able to unseat him. Furthermore, in Texas, there was the I forget the number of the district, but it was Tony Gonzalez versus Brendan Herrera, and Brendan Herrera lost by 400 votes against an incumbent, and the incumbent was backed by AIPAC. So as much as people like to make remarks about AIPAC and talk about AIPAC money, I honestly don't think that AIPAC has the kind of juice that people like to see. The backing that people say. I think that and especially when you look at the left, they're blaming AIPAC, and ignoring Jamaal Bowman's own personal failures. They're ignoring the redistricting. They're ignoring the fact that he didn't get out, and it's just an easy scapegoat. Oh, AIPAC, and it becomes a lazy man's reason for losing, especially in an age when people like to hate on Jews and hate on Israel.
Go ahead.
No.
I think in general you're right that Republicans have a better record of standing up to their establishments than Democrats do. But if I were to make kind of the case against AIPAC here, I've seen some kind of there are a lot of really smart right of center guys that are kind of thinking through how to negotiate this.
And I have no problem with limiting AIPAC's ability to affect it. I have no problem with registering or whatever. That's fine with me too. It's not like I'm pro AIPAC. I just one day.
Well, let me explain why the way that they fit into the ecosystem has been a little bit strange in the last couple of months. It's not that AIPAC is powerful that it ought to, if you ask me, register. It's that AIPAC formerly had. So I mean, AIPAC is full of. That old joke about Jews is, two Jews, three opinions, right? And so there is a lot of disagreement among donors, and the way that they paper that over is that AIPAC has sort of made the decision that we're not going to the way we're going to present ourselves in the United States is to support what the Israeli government wants. And it's that formal, papering over of the disagreements more or less on behalf of the Israeli government and like agreeing to represent their position that effectively, if you ask me, makes them a foreign lobby. Even if most of the donors are not Israeli, they're American Jews. And moreover, I would argue that point of view, that kind of bargain, that the way that they avoid airing the disagreements in public, the reason why it started to break down, and it was breaking down before October 7th, and in some ways October 7th served to consolidate a lot of American Jewish opinion. But before that, Israel was going through a constitutional crisis. What was happening was a lot of lawyers wanted to do in Israel what was successfully done through FedSoc to the American judiciary. And the problem is there are a whole lot of other checks and balances in the American system that if you really limit judicial power, everything's probably going to be okay. If you do it in like a highly majoritarian state of 9 million people that feels constantly besieged, that's going to tend in a direction that's like somewhat volatile. And so if you're going through a constitutional crisis by definition means we don't know who the government is. There are fights, and the different branches of government are fighting with each other. And so from AIPAC's perspective is, what Israeli government perspective are we speaking for here? Are we speaking for the left that's against Bibi's judicial reforms? Are we speaking for the maximalism of the Israeli right? And there's no way for them to kind of speak to that. And October 7th, gave the Israel lobby certainly something to rally around. But I think the big mistake right off the bat, and now the IDF spokesmen are starting to concede it, which is that completely eliminating Hamas is probably not a realistic goal. And moreover...
Yeah, I'm sorry, getting rid of Hamas is not a realistic goal, you said?
Completely eliminating it. And if you're, the fact is, that's what they started to say off the bat, and now even an IDF spokesman is conceding it's probably not in the cards. And right after October 7th, when emotions were running high, that was a very difficult thing to say. But this is sort of the course these things normally take. So this is kind of there are limitations to AIPAC's formally, sort of formal bargain to only support what the Israeli government is doing, both in terms of like the way it obscures what's actually possible when it comes to fighting Hamas, and because it obscures what's actually going on in Israeli politics, which is well reported in the Israeli media. I think that more, certainly conservatives should read the Israeli newspapers. I think for a lot of evangelicals, certainly the Israel that they love exists only in their minds.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.